Hey there! Tonight, as the world outside settles into its quiet rhythm, I invite you to slip into a world where time drifts like sand over stone. Ancient Egypt, after sunset, where mystery hums beneath every shifting dune. Imagine the chill of the desert, a hush broken by the gentle sigh of wind curling in the ruins east of Saqqara. Shadows flicker across columns that have withstood centuries, each surface engraved with stories, almost lost to memory, but not entirely, not yet. What if I told you that, within this seemingly lifeless stretch of sand and shattered limestone, there's a hidden chamber whose contents could upend everything we thought we knew about the pharaohs? Just wait until you hear what was uncovered deep beneath these ruins. A find so strange, so out of place, it left a room of seasoned archaeologists in utter silence. If winding through ancient corridors and following the hush of unsolved mysteries is your idea of an ideal bedtime story, then settle in and relax, watch along. And if this journey leaves you in wonder, feel free to join our global circle. People everywhere watching, unwinding, and sharing their slice of night. Let me know where you're listening in from, and what time your clock reads right now. Tonight, let's dim the lights, get comfortable, and step together into the golden gloom where history dares us to remember. The relentless whisper of sand carries a damp chill as evening falls, swirling around broken columns part. Buried beneath the silent desert, boots sink deep, their impressions lost as quickly as footsteps echo through the hush. The half-seen ruins, veiled in silver moonlight, rise, skeletal and bold, as if warning or welcoming those willing to listen to their stories. At Saqqara, the air feels different. It shivers with weight and anticipation, thick with the fragrance of wind-driven dust and faint mineral undertones of stones unearthed for the first time in thousands of years. Every rhythmic stride crunches and sinks. Every breath is tinged with the tang of ancient earth. For a seasoned archaeologist, the boundary between present and past blurs in places like this. There is a pulse that cannot be measured, a tension coaxed by the knowledge that somewhere below, an object older than any written legend may be waiting, and all that stands between it and the world's gaze is a spade in the right place or a keystone finally shifted. Centuries ago, this expanse buzzed not with silence but with life, the hiss of sandals pacing on sun-baked bricks, the solemn invocations whispered in funerary rituals, the muted clatter of artisans chiseling glyphs honoring kings and the gods who watched over them. Most who visit see only wind-gnawed pillars jutting from the sand. Yet for those who listen, even in the hush, the past seems to ripple. Within these fragmented walls, the drama of unresolved history lingers. And yet, tonight, there is something more, a feeling sharper than mere curiosity. It's the sense that what is buried beneath these stones could tilt the delicate balance of all that is understood about the origins of civilization. An uneasy alliance settles between the living and what came before. Fingertips brush the faint remnants of paint on a fallen block, tracing a falcon's wing now smudged by time. The dust shifts. There, beneath an oblique shaft of moonlight on one toppled lintel, a pattern emerges that had once been hidden by crusted clay. A sequence of glyphs, strange for this time and place, spirals in a way that defies comparison with familiar funerary verses. Instinct sharpens. These symbols are not random. They are a map, or perhaps a warning. Nearby, the whine of the wind seems to ebb, as if the very weather is watching. The archaeologist kneels, mindful of every movement, knowing that even the faintest disturbance might erase clues that have endured since the pharaonic era. As a gloved hand brushes aside more sand, a flash of ochre reveals a new line, a stylized depiction of a jackal facing away from Anubis, not toward him, which is highly unusual. This single detail is enough to ignite a new trail of questions, for in standard tomb iconography, the jackal always looks toward Anubis. What has happened here? The hush deepens, disturbed only by a distant hollow clang, metal scraping against limestone in a neighboring trench. It is a call, quick and subdued, the kind that sends both hope and dread through a dig team. Something has been found. The archaeologist rises, steps quickening despite the heaviness of the sand, leaving the strange jackal glyph behind in favor of this new, urgent mystery. Inside a makeshift tent aglow with soft lantern light, the team waits, eyes wide, breaths visible in the cooling desert air. Spread across a battered canvas tarp is an unassuming stone fragment, a lump at first glance, yet as the shadows dance across its surface, unmistakable shapes emerge. One side is inscribed with a cartouche, but not of a known pharaoh. Instead, it reads like a cipher, a string of pictograms that seem to reference places and rulers that do not appear in any chronicle or list. There are symbols of birds not native to the Nile Valley, and odd concentric circles that scholars have long debated, but never conclusively explained. Tension mounts. The fragment looks ancient, but its style feels jarringly out of place, almost as if it was carved by outsiders, or by someone deliberately trying to disguise the truth within layered riddles. A hush settles again as the team gathers closer, each expert offering their own theory. Some whisper about a lost dynasty erased purposefully from history, while others quietly suggest the evidence of foreign contact far earlier than previously believed. No one is willing to speak too loudly. Even the desert itself seems to advise caution. For those gathered under that flickering light, this moment feels like standing on the edge of a revelation. The air thickens, recognition prickling in the space between logic and intuition. What does it mean if the timelines are wrong? If there truly was an unknown pharaoh ruling from the shadows, or a visitor from a distant civilization leaving marks beneath Egyptian sands, long before the world was supposedly connected? Suddenly, the lantern guttered as a gust burst through the tent flap, scattering sand over the delicate fragment. Quick, careful hands scrambled to protect the artifact, brushing away the intrusive grains. But the interruption feels like a warning, a subtle reminder that these ruins give up their secrets slowly and not always kindly. The ambient noise of the desert, at times so subtle it is almost a presence itself, sharpens at intervals. The flutter of flapping canvas, the creak of ropes, the distant caw of a crow standing sentinel atop a fractured column. The seasoned archaeologist steps back, surveying not only the artifact, but the moment in time it has opened. Here, in a place where the stars wheel overhead, as they did in the time of the pyramids, questions swirl as thick as the wind-blown sand. What lost stories, purposefully erased or simply forgotten, might sleep beneath these ruins, waiting for the right sequence of moonlight, human curiosity, and careful hands to coax them out? The answer, if it comes, will not be simple. Each artifact is a puzzle that begets a dozen more. Each glyph that contradicts what is taught crackles with the possibility of new history being born. In the hush between footsteps and the slow, cautious brushing away of time, the true stakes coalesce. Every revelation here has the potential to shift humanity's understanding of where we come from. And, perhaps more provocatively, who else may have walked these sands alongside us? Just as the tension in the tent threatens to snap, an uneven boom rings out from further up the dig site, a signal only understood by those who live by the unspoken language of excavators. A major find, urgent and unexplained, waits to be revealed. The archaeologist glances outside, where the desert stretches onward, layered in shadow. For a heartbeat, the air is electrified by anticipation. Not fear exactly, but something infinitely close. It is the sense that this journey is about to curve sharply into the unknown, with the next step birthing new riddles and impossible choices. From the jagged horizon, the moon spills a new path of light. Somewhere nearby, a fissure has opened, a shadowed opening cut sharply into a limestone outcrop, its entrance lost to memory and the press of time. The sand at its threshold remains undisturbed, a blank canvas daring the next explorer to mark it. The journey presses inward, the heartbeat of unsolved history growing stronger with every echoing footfall. And where that fissure leads, only the night and what it hides will tell. A jagged fissure in the limestone suggests nothing more than the relentless patience of wind and rain. Yet, pressed close, the faint shape of a rectangular doorway takes form, muted, almost denied by the swirling desert air. The sun stands high above the Egyptian sands, its harsh light halted at the entrance, unable to breach the heavy shadows lurking beyond. On this nondescript outcrop, something purpose built slumbers, ancient and overlooked. The archaeologist, dust clinging to his boots, kneels as the desert hush seems to deepen in solidarity. His gloved hands brush away loose grit, careful and reverent, until fingertips land upon shallow grooves, too deliberate to be dismissed as natural. The stone beneath his palm remains cool, even as the morning's heat mounts. Faint flecks of ochre and cobalt linger on the battered lintel, defiant streaks of color against pale limestone. Just visible in the gloom is a sigil, crude and geometric, utterly alien beside the sweeping flourishes that typify familiar dynastic seals. It prickles at the mind, a challenge etched in pigment, promising secrets older than memory. Half the cartouche remains, time having erased even the hint of a royal name. Yet the composition of its remnants feels charged, like a cipher whose key has never been spoken aloud. Above, the wind whistles across the escarpment, coaxing a low, mournful sigh from the fissure's depth, as though echoing everything left unvoiced by the stones. With slow precision, the explorer presses into the tiny seams beside the entrance. These are no common barriers. Layer by patient layer, mechanical locks, fantastically arrayed, each with the complexity of a puzzle box, demand to be solved, not forced. Spring after juddering, spring releases, until finally A shudder runs through the threshold. There is a moment where even the camels far off seem unnaturally still, their outlines blurred in vibrating heat. The hush is absolute. He draws a breath. The air at the threshold is starkly different, damp, tight, with the promise of hidden things. The tang of old iron and compacted earth stings his senses. Pausing, the archaeologist withdraws a torch, the scratch and rasp of striking flint unnaturally loud. Suddenly, a narrow ribbon of fire claws at the darkness, pulling trembling shadows out of hiding and revealing the shape of a descending passage, uncertain, uneven, chiseled long before even the earliest mapped tombs. The flicker rakes across ancient glyphs, scarred by time, some half swallowed by calcite deposits, others violently defaced as if someone, centuries before, sought to erase a dangerous narrative. For every familiar ibis or outstretched hand, an unfamiliar shape lurks, edges sharp, perspective warped, purposefully baffling to any traditional interpreter. The corridor breathes a subtle chill. Each step echoes, soft but insistent. The archaeologist's boots press into an inch of powdery sand, silencing the tread, yet raising a delicate cascade, each grain whispering across the flagstones. Occasionally, one can hear the subtle shift of air deeper within, an assurance that emptiness does not reign unbroken. Just ahead, the corridor tilts, segmenting into two halls, one leading further into encroaching darkness, the other deflecting right, where a shaft of wind carries a flutter of ancient papyrus. He kneels, holding the torch low. The dust reveals a thin reddish track, possibly ochre, running contrary to where feet would have naturally fallen. There is an uneasy angularity to the wall carvings beside this detail. Twisted limbs, eyes displaced, not unlike the motifs sometimes found in later Amarna art, yet raw, less sophisticated, almost as if someone in the shadows of Egypt's dawn had tried and failed to imitate a future style. The explorer leans in, squinting at a small watermark perched between glyphs. It resembles a lotus, but swaddled in a pattern, coils within coils, the likes of which he has never seen cited in any catalogue or museum archive. Unexpectedly, as the torchlight sweeps, the sigil from the entrance re-emerges, this time repeated and embedded in a grid bordering the rightward passage. Its deliberate recurrence contradicts every known pattern of ancient Egyptian sacred geometry. Were these symbols meant to warn or beckon? Before such speculation can coalesce into theory, a subtle crack in the flagstone betrays an uneasy truth. The archaeologist pauses, heart steady, palms pressed flat. With careful deliberation, he fashions a narrow probe, sliding it across the fracture. A shallow draft rises up from below, carrying not only stale air, but the faintest trace of something organic, brittle and metallic. He sends the light down into the fissure. It reaches only a foot before snuffing into darkness, revealing nothing but possibility and the chance of ruin. Time dilates. Already the temperature seems to have dropped. The air is cool, heavy, with a dense must that sticks to the lungs. The torch guttering reveals a sculpted threshold at the pivot where the corridor bends sharply. He edges closer, breathing in the secrets of centuries unrecorded, and halts as a thin filigree of gold winks out from the dust, a broken cartouche compressed into the mortar between blocks. The artistry, once brought to life with steady hands, now exists only in fragments. Yet even in its ruined state, it radiates an unsettling defiance. Neither Old Kingdom nor Middle. Scholars have never recorded anything quite like this, and in that realization, a delicate tension ripples through the bones of the chamber. Then, in a sudden alignment, the echoing hush breaks. A low and measured thud from somewhere deeper still, too rhythmic to be the settling of stone, and too calculated to be the wind. The sound teases at the relationship between the living and lost. Is it a device set in motion by ancient engineers, or a warning, hanging like a thread across the ages? The archaeologist stiffens. Every hair seems alert. He waits, inventorying every tangible clue, mind racing through centuries of documented burial rites and their subversions. The red track on the floor, the non-canonical glyphs, the ruinous locks, each threads a different, deeply fraying tapestry. The moment holds, and then the silence resumes, thicker than before. There are no quick answers here, only a catalogue that refuses to settle into any period textbooks, a slow unknitting of what was thought certain about the pharaonic past. In this buried threshold, cut stone stills and painted sigils ask questions in a language no one living remembers. The desert wind, grown bolder now, rakes through the doorway and stirs fine grit along the corridor. The archaeologist lingers on the edge, torch flame restless, just as the path ahead narrows again, bending from plain view. Somewhere within that hidden via, the unknown signals its presence, compelling the living to trespass just a little deeper. Inside, the torch flame licks at stone, catching uneven seams in the corridor's wall. In the wavering half-light, the ancient air is heavy, thick with the mineral tang so distinct in Egypt's forgotten tombs. Here, buried deep beneath shifting waves of sand, a band of glyphs unfurls across rough plaster, elaborate but subtle in their defiance. The limestone walls absorb and release the glow in uneven patches, each glyph momentarily blooming beneath the gentle sweep of fire. Familiar shapes, ankh, scarab, the falcon's wing, start to surface from the ochre dust, only to dissolve into unfamiliar fragments. The script winds onwards, unfurling into patterns never committed to the scrolls of scribes or revered priests. The finger of the seasoned archaeologist traces this curious band, the skin of his fingertips electrified by the charged hush that surrounds each line. These are not the proud utterances of royal decree or funerary hymn. The arrangement of shapes, the weave of geometric forms, all suggest some deeper, veiled meaning, something intended for eyes that are neither mortal nor passing. He recognizes the markers of the pharaonic period in the faint order of the script, and yet their twists veer away from any canon he has studied. The walls seem to drink in the sound of his breath, the gentle rasp of linen against sandstone, the soft crunch of dust beneath his boot. Light catches irregularly on one symbol, a spiral within a hexagon, delicate and exact, but utterly anomalous. It sits apart from the symmetry of the others, as if asserting its right to be both known and unknown at once. The archaeologist pauses, torch raised, the weight of centuries coiling around him. Each breath he takes seems to echo into the hollow belly of the earth, reverberating alongside the unspoken question: who wrote these forbidden texts? And what message did they entrust to the darkness? A shifting wind pushes through a breach behind the wall. Impossible within this depth, beneath tons of stone and silence. The gust sets the flame shivering, throwing the glyphs into distorted waves, and the corridor stretches further than any map had suggested. Here, the air carries the faintest scent of myrrh, as though the passage itself once doubled as a shrine and now seeks to recall the presence of the gods. The archaeologist leans closer. In the scuffed outline of one glyph, a recess catches his eye. He presses gently, expecting nothing more than a hollow thud. Instead, a muted click responds, stone moving against stone, and a previously invisible panel trembles inwards. There, hidden inside a cradle of cut rock, lies an object half swathed in linen. The air is suddenly sharper, as if the room itself has held its breath for millennia. Slowly, reverently, the wrapping is unfurled. The artifact, a tablet of copper, inscribed in the fragmented tongue that mirrors the wall, rots at the edges but gleams unmistakably in the center. Its face bears not the countenance of a king or god, but a map. This map, however, seems to chart not rivers or tombs, but lines converging inward, spirals upon spirals, echoing the anomalous symbol found earlier. The mind reels, recognizing that an entire system of meaning has lain dormant here, protected by stone, perhaps never intended to surface. Just as he reaches to decipher the map's central mark, a subtle shift draws his focus upward. A small cascade of dust falls from the ceiling. Overhead, partially hidden in shadow, is a second, parallel band of glyphs, these almost entirely eroded, except for a single intact figure, a stylized ibis with an unfurled scroll at its feet. For this brief moment, the past flickers between clarity and obscurity. Was this a priest of Thoth, keeper of knowledge, or someone else entirely who left this cryptic record? The silence is broken by the archaeologist's cautious notepad flip, but another sound intrudes, an unexpected echo from farther down the corridor. It is low, resonant, almost like the shifting of a great stone slab. With every torch-lit step, his own shadow distorts grotesquely across the walls, as if trailing him with silent intent. Across the next threshold, the architecture shifts dramatically. Instead of the typical raised reliefs and formulaic inscriptions celebrating solar cycles or divine kingship, the chamber narrows. Black basalt, rarely used in these subterranean rooms, lines the base of the walls. The air bristles with new cold, carried along the slick surface, unlike any burial vault recorded in centuries of annals. The torch flame reflects back in multiple fragments, echoing his presence from every dim corner. A jarring detail emerges. On the basalt, inscribed in a harsh, angular hand, is a symbol seen in no canonical Egyptian context, an intersecting triangle and crescent, encircled by opposing arrows. There is evidence of haste, scratches, hesitations, almost as if the person who carved this coded message was racing against time itself. The archaeologist's breath fogs the cold air, beads of moisture collecting on his brow as tension mounts. While he catalogues the strange marks, his memory tugs at the earlier spiral within hexagon motif. It recurs again here, forming the heart of a new tableau, a sequence of spirals branching outward, each flanked by the crescent triangle symbol. In the stillness, the faintest, most improbable sensation stirs, like the barely audible whisper of sand running endlessly just out of view. But even as his mind starts to pass this sequence, a second major divergence reveals itself. Instead of funerary vessels or the expected funerary texts, the chamber's only objects are cryptic apparatuses, copper rods joined with obsidian, and fragments of polished quartz laid out as if to measure or amplify something lost to the ages. The setup conjures visions of ritual, but stripped of the certainty archaeologists rely on. No explicit offering is present. No pharaoh's name shouts claim to eternity. The implication grows uneasy. This may be evidence not only of a forgotten language, but a forgotten practice, something other than worship or commemoration. His fingers hover over the quartz, just barely grazing the surface. The stone is surprisingly warm to the touch. It hums faintly, a vibration felt more than heard, shattering the stillness. Under the spell of the moving light, the glyphs on the copper tablet now shimmer in patterns that seem to respond to the physical presence of the living, a feedback between lost time and present touch. The archaeologist retreats a step, pulse racing. At that instant, a sudden shift in the atmosphere closes the chapter. Behind him, a hidden door, long masked by dust and shadows, slowly rotates open. From its threshold spills a pale, colorless light, sharper and colder than the torch. The opening seems impossibly well cut, geometric, yet with an irregularity that speaks to human hands struggling to push the bounds of what was known. A soft echo pulses from within, marking the chamber's threshold with strange resonance. Stepping forward, he is greeted not by the fetid warmth typical of tombs, but a vast space, unexpectedly cold, where the rules of ordinary burial practice no longer apply. In this moment, as unseen air flows past and the torch gutters, ancient questions hang heavier than ever before. What ritual or knowledge demanded such secrecy, and whose voice whispers yet from behind the glyphs? A hollow chill lingers as the archaeologist steps across the boundary where daylight surrenders. The soft echo of leather boots swallowed by the frozen stillness of the chamber. The change in temperature is immediate, biting through layers of linen and canvas, whispering a secret that no marker of time has revealed. Torches stutter against the cavernous, dark, thin flickers, licking the unyielding stone as the explorer moves forward. The air tastes of iron and vanished incense, a silence somehow thicker for the muffled shuffle through ankle-deep sand. Dust swirls up in lazy vortices with every step, catching the hesitant light and revealing the sheer scale of the room, a burial vault, but not as described in any chronicle of ancient Egypt. It is colder here than the desert allows, colder than the living remember. At the heart of this void rests a sarcophagus, a leviathan among relics. Its brooding silhouette dominates the chamber, black as obsidian, yet rougher, darker still. The archaeologist crouches, eyes narrowed to where torchlight glimmers dully on the lid. It is a single slab, unbreachable, the stone's surface absorbing all light. No familiar veins, no traces of granite or basalt as found in Giza's tombs. Instead, the mineral looks alien, the sort of blackness one expects in deepest space, not beneath Egypt's sun. A hesitant fingertip brushes against its side. The texture is impossibly smooth, but lacks the warmth of worked stone. Under the right angle, faint, snaking sigils just begin to glow, blue-white under spectral dust, like the memory of electricity in prehistoric air. The archaeologist circles, sidestepping chunks of masonry scattered, like the aftermath of a forgotten quarrel. There are no chisel marks, no telltale slips or scars, no signature of human error. The lid's edges are sharp, carved with a precision so total, so indifferent, it unsettles the seasoned mind. The stillness here is complete, except for an almost imperceptible hum when fingertips glide over the luminous glyphs. This motet of sound and sight is punctuated only by the faint crack of sand underfoot, an accidental intrusion from the present into the calcified past. A closer look reveals the patterns are not overscript, but what might be a pictorial record. Shapes emerge, a sun held aloft between opposing hands, boats sliding up impossible angles, figures with elongated skulls kneeling as if in supplication to an unseen force. Several motifs repeat a mysterious symbol, coiled like a serpent swallowing its own tail, yet bearing a sharp, unfamiliar angularity. The archaeologist's training claws for parallels. No known dynasty claims this art, yet its weight feels older. The atmosphere grows denser, pressing on the lungs, as if the sarcophagus itself resists translation, repelling meaning from its surface. An investigative lamp is drawn, light trained low to avoid drowning out the ghostly patterns. The archaeologist traces a scene etched along the base, what appears to be a procession, masked figures holding up a smaller version of the black sarcophagus on poles. The faces are rendered in profile, but with eyes looking forward, impossibly modern in their depth. Around them swirl loops and stars, some echoed in the constellations above ancient Memphis, others unlike any the scholar has ever charted. The dust gives way, and the glyphs underneath briefly ignite where the lamp's battery flares. The sense is overwhelming. This is no ordinary burial, no matter how great the interred. This is a warning, or perhaps a key. Suddenly, a low resonance, barely felt through the floor, begins to throb at the edge of hearing. The explorer stills, ears straining. There is nothing. Only the memory of that pulse, as if knocked loose by breath alone, as if something deep within the stone is listening in return. Beneath the sibilant hush of shifting sand, the archaeologist begins to notice an eerie order. The luminous lines do not merely depict, but map. The lid's markings form a spiral, drawing the eye inward, toward a subtle indentation near the exact center, a flaw or a purpose. Here, the micro-motifs knot around a single unfamiliar glyph. Every instinct urges caution, yet the compulsion to document overrides fear. The explorer withdraws thick paper and graphite, hands moving with deliberate care, copying the tangled sigil. Ash from the torch floats down, distorting the design momentarily, before being brushed away. Each curve and angle is committed twice, once to the page and once to memory, while behind, the quiet feels heavier than stone. As the motif is lifted into the light for comparison, a soft sigh stirs the dust. The torch's flame dips. At first, it seems a trick of the air, until it is clear the silence has deepened. Not mere absence of sound, but as if the room holds its breath. The archaeologist stands and steps back, gaze flicking between hieroglyphic margin and black lid, searching for linkage. The impressions are unlike even the wildest periods of early dynasty. Egypt. Is this the handiwork of a priesthood lost before Hatshepsut, or something stranger? A flicker in the lamp's periphery draws attention to the far wall. Once blank and eroded, there is now the faint glint of something embedded in the stone. The archaeologist, cautious, kneels, scraping gently, sweeping grit away from the brittle surface. There, half swallowed by limestone, is an object shaped like a disc, matte and etched with the same enigmatic symbol as the center of the sarcophagus. Removing it is risky. The surrounding crust is fragile, threatening to collapse under force. Instead, the explorer traces its outline with a gloved hand, noting how it quivers faintly under touch, as if resonating in sympathy with the unseen pulse earlier. The sense of being watched intensifies, prickling the back of the neck. Beyond the torch's reach, shadows breed at the extremes of vision. Yet, the compulsion to understand overrides every warning. The archaeologist positions a notebook, records the discovery in terse, halting script, breath cueing short and quick between lines. The cold seeps deeper into bone. Every detail, from the chill to the luminous glyphs to the strange soundless echo, suggests this place was not merely meant for burial. Instead, it is a mechanism or a message, cast in black stone and disguised as a tomb. 370 paces of corridor and collapsed masonry mark the underground path back to the surface. No one has managed to document a sarcophagus of this magnitude, let alone one fashioned from an unrecorded mineral, in any registry from the pharaonic period or after. Defies explanation. Every account of ancient Egyptian craftsmanship bows before the scale and enigma of this object. Theories tangle and fracture in the mind. Some believe the ancients possessed knowledge far surpassing what their monuments reveal, while others suspect natural processes and lost quarries. And yet, the artifact here does not fit into even the wildest conjectures. Torch in hand, the archaeologist lingers for a final inventory and begins snapping careful photographs. The digital lens, for some reason, fails to capture the glow of the glyphs, rendering them mute. Only the rough contours of the lid and base remain. Even technology, it seems, is unwelcome here. The whisper of sand against stone is the only reliable witness. Before leaving the chamber, the explorer marks the induction point on a sketched site map and annotates the layout for colleagues never destined to see the tomb in person. This is no ordinary site, a labyrinth disguised as a grave, designed to arrest prying eyes and incurable curiosity alike. With every step back, the tension eases slightly. The oppressive cold relents. But a fresh question nests in the mind. Was this chamber a warning or an invitation to look deeper? Just beyond the heavy threshold, desert heat returns in a sudden, overwhelming rush, forcing sweat from skin left chilled moments earlier. In the new light, the corridor ahead fractures into a spider's web of narrow passageways carved from bedrock and veiled by drifting dust. The journey continues, mysteries multiplying within the maze. Stepping away from the shadow of the sarcophagus, the archaeologist let the torch's golden glow carve trembling shapes along the corridor's edges. Here, the passageways refuse to yield their secrets easily. Their path twisted, at times seeming to double back on itself, as if the very heart of these ruins was determined to remain uncharted. The walls felt different in this part of the complex. A pale, featureless stone, cool against the palm, marked only by shallow grooves. Not inscriptions, not images, merely faint traces of where stone had shifted and scoured over long centuries. Footsteps echoed against the stone with an uncanny intensity. The sound rebounded strangely, as though footsteps came not just from behind, but from somewhere deep within the corridor's looping geometry. Sometimes it was softer, muffled by drifted sand, but at other moments the noise flared sudden and sharp, ricocheting through the passage in ways that quickened the pulse. The lantern cast long shadows that arced and danced around blind corners, exaggerating every carved edge, every scrape in the rock. In that silence lived something more than emptiness. It was a presence that seemed to hover at the edge of awareness, as if the labyrinth itself kept careful count of each step forward. The air carried a dryness that sucked the moisture from the tongue and sent a grainy whisper brushing past the ear. There was no adornment on the walls, no hieroglyphs, no guiding symbol or hint, only the sensation that the design itself was the message, a puzzle, a warning, or perhaps a final act of reverence meant for the dead, or a trap for the living. Torchlight glimmered on what, for a fleeting moment, looked like the impression of a palm pressed into the stone. On closer inspection, it faded, gone before it could be confirmed, as if this maze liked to play tricks on the eyes. It was easy to imagine, in this place, the intentions of ancient builders, generations of workers carving pathways fashioned not for ceremony, but for misdirection. Their deliberate efforts to mislead, to cast off pursuers or eager thieves, were woven deep into the structure's bones. The design made the explorer doubt every choice, each fork in the path. It made each turn feel momentous. There was an artistry, too, in the mischief. At certain angles, the corridor would subtly narrow, gently pressing the explorer closer to the stone, until the sense of enclosure grew almost unbearable. Then suddenly, the space would yawn open again into a silent, echoing pocket of darkness, lending the passage an unsettling rhythm, a natural heartbeat, or perhaps the gasp of some stone-buried beast waking from sleep. Still, the archaeologist pressed on. Beneath each footstep, beneath each uncertain echo, awoke the possibility of discovery. Whispers of sand shifted underfoot, slipping across the smooth floor, and the passage's faint draft tugged at the hem of their coat. At irregular intervals, branching corridors tempted investigation. But the torch's light seemed to bleed from the air the moment a foot was set beyond the main path, as though the stone itself was hungry for secrets and soaked them up on contact. Then, midway through one especially confounding bend, a chill ran along the length of the wall. Here, a new groove interrupted the otherwise flawless stone. This furrow was deeper, more deliberate. When the torch swept across it, the mark seemed to shiver, almost as if it were a single character plucked from an unknown language. A silent warning meant for anyone persistent or foolish enough to reach this depth. The archaeologist traced it slowly, feeling the weight of centuries pressing against the palm. Above, the air thickened with dust, and down the passage, A sudden draught whispered past, carrying with it a note of coldness that tightened the muscles at the nape of the neck. At this point, something shifted, not merely within the walls, but within the explorer's sense of time. With every twist and turn, hours blended together, light and shadow stretching out until the boundaries between them blurred. The maze's layout had long ceased to follow any logic known to modern eyes. It was a riddle written in stone, each decision made at a fork, potentially a step further from the surface, deeper into territory the world had not seen since the days when the pharaohs still commanded allegiance across the Nile. Around the next bend, the corridor abruptly dropped away into a hollowed-out landing. Here the temperature shifted, the air growing perceptibly cooler. What should have been a dead end instead revealed a series of shallow alcoves carved neatly into the wall, shelves for something, or perhaps niches to honor the forgotten dead. But they were empty, except for the gentle dusting of sand and fragments of blackened wood, so old that even the lines of grain had decayed into ashy residue. A single stone at the base of one niche stood out, oddly polished, unlike the rest. When the archaeologist knelt to inspect it, another sound joined the tapestry of echoes, a faint metallic tapping, far out of sync with any movement in the corridor. It struck twice, then was gone, as if some unseen guardian had noticed their breach and now lurked silent among the shadows. This sudden, inexplicable sound, unexpected as a shout in the darkness, served as a jarring twist in the familiar rhythm of the maze. It sent an electric hush through the stone corridors and set the imagination racing. What lay deeper still, protected by these endless, misleading paths? What secret was worth such an elaborate architecture of confusion and fear? Yet no time was left for speculation. The very feeling of the corridors changed after the sound faded. Each step now seemed oddly muted, the familiar echo exchanged for a velvet silence that weighed even more heavily than noise. It was as if the presence detected earlier had become watchful, the labyrinth's mood shifting from indifference to cautious scrutiny. At one turn, a faint discoloration marked the otherwise perfect wall, an oblong smudge of dried ochre, perhaps the residue from a torch burning centuries ago. Under the archaeologist's careful gaze, it became clear this was more than a stain. On the surface, fine lines drew a geometric pattern, triangles and spirals, shapes unfamiliar and yet deeply intentional, as though someone had tried to communicate across centuries without words. The torchlight flickered over these ghostly markings, lending the impression of movement beneath the surface, as if the stone itself recoiled from scrutiny. From a nearby crevice, a slow current of air issued forth, carrying with it the scent of old parchment and mineral dust. Leaning closer, the archaeologist caught glimpses of something hidden just out of sight, a sliver of darkness that felt thicker and more purposeful than the mere absence of light. The sense of anticipation tightened, a warning thrumming within the bones. Somewhere beyond this narrow slot lay another chamber, another layer of this burial enigma. As the corridors wound, invisible thresholds were passed. At intervals, the sound of shifting sand returned, sometimes beneath the floor, sometimes high above, a phantom tide moving through the stones. The passage grew more treacherous. Stones jutted at irregular intervals, forcing the explorer to adjust their steps, to slow, to wonder how many before them had been brought to a halt by exhaustion, darkness, or fear. In the hush, a thought surfaced, unspoken but insistent. What if these passageways, with all their turns and double takes, were not just meant to keep intruders out, but to trap something within? The fortress of confusion might have protected not just treasures, but knowledge itself, a burden no living soul was meant to bear freely. Still drawn by a force both rational and mysterious, the archaeologist pressed on. The labyrinth's memory seemed almost tactile now, as if every wall pressed back against the palm, registering each trespass in a ledger no eyes would ever see. Somewhere in the quiet, overlapping footsteps, the familiar whisper of sand signaled that a new secret was near at hand. At the last, the corridor widened again, a subtle shift that brought a breath of cooler air flowing ahead, tinged this time with a mineral sharpness and the faintest scent of ancient resin. In the half-light, shapes half buried beneath wind-blown debris waited, obscured and patient, for the careful hand who might decipher their meaning. The journey, it seemed, was only beginning to yield its most enigmatic rewards. A stir of gritty sand follows every cautious step through the half-buried labyrinth nestled in Egypt's vast, unyielding desert. Days in these ruins unfold slowly, ruled by the patience of the sun and the measured breaths of an archaeologist steeped in years, one who knows the subtle language of stone and dust. Here, beneath the domed silence, the promise of discovery pulses just beneath the surface, teasing the senses with a disquiet that feels both ancient and immediate. This morning, sunlight pierces narrow fissures between toppled blocks, strewing gold across the debris. From the shifting drifts, a glimpse of blue-green catches the eye, the telltale luster of faience, but oddly fractured, conflicted. Kneeling, the archaeologist brushes away a veil of sand, exposing a shard delicately incised with swirling patterns that defy the expected order of Egyptian symbolism. Its markings loop and dart like foreign script, unlike any found in dynastic records or well-explored tombs. Fingertips trace its edge, feeling not only its chill, but the discomforting sense of dissonance. The artifact seems too ancient, its motifs too unfamiliar, to belong in a place like this. In the stillness, the faint whisper of wind through cracked corridors almost sounds like voices, as if the stone itself is murmuring secret histories. Nearby, half buried beneath a tangle of wind-blown reeds that somehow cling to life in this forsaken place, another relic waits. It is a statuette, modest in size but painted with vivid mineral pigments long faded from the Egyptian palette. The figure's eyes gaze outward, their lines bold and all wrong, rendered in a style that whispers of distant lands predating the earliest trade records ever catalogued. The archaeologist narrows their gaze. The shape of the arms, the particular pitch of the shoulders, echoes none of the known gods nor the old kingdom artisans. It almost seems as if its creator had never seen Egypt at all, and yet here it rests, encased in the silt of the Nile's ancient tributaries. The air down here is heavy with both expectation and the metallic tang of oxidized minerals. Slipping deeper into a collapsed chamber where sunlight never dares, the torch's flame flickers hungrily along a scatter of small metal fragments crusted with powdery dust. Lifting one, the oddity is immediate. Its sheen is too lustrous, too complex for copper or bronze, and its weight feels subtly alien in the hand. No laboratory has ever been able to peg its dating, and its alloy resists even the most rigorous testing, a material not registered anywhere in Egypt's catalogue or, for that matter, its neighbours' histories. The dust clings stubbornly to the artifact's surface, as if guarding its true nature from prying modern eyes. Together, these finds form a shadow puzzle, unmooring the accepted chronology that guides so much of Egypt's story. Each one seems to laugh softly at the human urge for neat order. Who left these artifacts here? And for what purpose? Why do they defy the rhythms of pharaonic dynasties and the reach of well-charted trade routes? These questions hang in the dusk-lit chamber, refusing to resolve. Yet the evidence continues to surface. In a narrow passage, the archaeologist notices vertical scores etched into the wall. They duck beneath a faint arch, lamp held high, and there it is, a fragment of blue pigment, embedded in a shallow groove above eye level. Closer examination reveals more markings, each subtle as a breath, mapping a course that curves away from Egyptian tradition. This is no mere graffiti. The spacing, precision, and unlikely pigment suggest hands practiced in an art left undocumented by royal scribes. A sudden gust draws in the scent of old earth and spices, momentarily disrupting the heavy calm. Sand swirls in miniature eddies. As it settles, a geometric design comes to light, obscured beneath centuries of debris. Unlike the flowing symbols carved elsewhere, this pattern is angular, strikingly reminiscent of motifs seen along ancient Levantine or Aegean shores, their origins still debated in scholarly halls far from here. No records speak of such exchanges touching this period. Everything here speaks of an intrusion into Egypt's carefully recorded legacy, as if entire chapters had been written in invisible ink. Down another sloping aisle, the whisper of sand underfoot is interrupted by a hollow thunk. When the debris is swept aside, a coiled metal thread reveals itself, strangely flexible despite its age. Interwoven at intervals along its length are bead-like nodules whose composition proves resistant to modern analysis. Under lamplight, these glimmer with a faint blue iridescence, like a memory from a vanished world. Each object stubbornly refuses categorization, as if their very existence is a quiet rebellion against the history books. For a moment, the archaeologist senses the weight of eyes from some distant era, as if the stones themselves remember these objects before all else, before kings, before temples. The chamber seems to breathe, cool air gusting out from a fissure that had gone unnoticed. This, too, is a clue. With a practiced hand, the wall is tapped and listens for its answer. The echo that returns is too deep, hinting at a space beyond, an untouched void carved into the foundation itself. The journey presses on. At each turn, the ruins offer another challenge to logic. Scholars debate meanings in university halls, arguing fervently over trade, lost civilizations, and the blurred boundaries of cultural contact. Was Egypt more porous than history suggests, drawing threads from unsuspected places? Or are these objects the lonely detritus of forgotten visitors, travelers who vanished with the last drift of sand? Each theory stirs new controversy. No consensus is reached. The urge to tuck these misplaced relics back into familiar timelines is strong. But down here, cleaving to comfortable narratives, only muddies the waters further. A hush descends as a new chamber opens. The flesh of stone here is marbled with veins of ochre and quartz. The faintest glyphs shine through the torchlight, their forms incomplete but tantalizing. A fragment of a ship, impossibly stylized, floats amid a storm of jagged lines. It suggests motion, journeys, or arrivals from over the horizon. Curiosity intensifies. Could these be echoes of long-lost voyages, memorialized in secret, waiting for the world to find them? At that instant, another pattern stands out. A triangular emblem nested within a circle, brushed onto the wall in a paint unlike anything found in existing tomb palettes. The colors shift subtly in the flickering light, hinting at formulas lost to both Egyptian and modern chemistry. Across the desert, from Giza's pyramids to the Black Land's farthest border, such symbols are nowhere else to be found. The magnitude of the unknown presses in, heavier than the centuries of sand heaped above. What other truths lie buried, still resisting the sweep of the archaeologist's hand? The urge to keep searching grows with every unexplained find, every echoing footstep resonating against indifferent stone. Each secret chamber and every shard, pigment, and enigmatic touch. These are not mere relics, but invitations to see Egypt's true history as something both larger and stranger than ever imagined. As torchlight flickers across a wall obscured by ages of drifting sand, the archaeologist's gaze fixes on an unexpected relief. The hush of the desert evening wraps itself around the ruined gateway as the archaeologist moves deeper into the crumbling heart of the ancient city. Wind sighs over buried thresholds, brushing grains of sand in restless swirls that almost seem to whisper messages from the past. In the half-light, each breath carries the tang of old stone, sun-baked but touched now by the cool promise of coming night. The air, heavy with dust and possibility, seems to hum with a tension that has not lessened in thousands of years. His fingers brush along the limestone wall, the texture changing with every step, smooth in places where artisans once labored, rough where time's abrasions have eaten away at the detail. Suddenly, he stops. The flicker of his torch catches an unfamiliar pattern, drawing long shadows across an ancient relief. All around him are the usual processions of pharaohs and gods, but at this spot the tableau shifts. One figure is rendered stark and angular, apart from the ritual patterns of dynastic Egypt. Something in its bearing, an intent posture, shoulders rigid, chin raised, commands attention. Yet it is the object in the carving's arms that sets the archaeologist's pulse quickening, neither scepter nor crook, but a curious tangle of rods and spheres, the like of which exists in no known catalogue. He kneels, the sand crunching softly beneath his boot. Torchlight sinks into the deep groove of the carving, illuminating details obscured by centuries of dust. The device seems almost mechanical, with odd symmetry that feels out of place amid the flowing hieroglyphic lines. Its design echoes none of the tools uncovered before in Egypt. The rods gleam with the suggestion of metal, and the configuration of spheres hints at a function no one now remembers. Every shadow cast by the firelight only deepens the riddle. Above the artifact-bearing figure, the scene offers only the faintest of clues, a line of smaller glyphs, nearly erased, suggesting that the device was revered, or perhaps feared. Below, almost invisible, are delicate scratches, Strange, repeating geometries that do not match any scroll the archaeologist has ever studied. He leans closer, holding his breath. The silence is broken only by the faint drip of water somewhere beyond, and the tremulous flutter of torchlight dancing on ancient stone. There is a stillness in this chamber, an oppressive kind, as though a memory survives here, etched into rock and dust. The feeling is unmistakable, that this symbol was never meant for common eyes. A lingering residue of secrecy fills the air, as if the hands that carved these marks believed their knowledge to be forbidden. The archaeologist's mind races. Had some lost group possessed technologies unexplained by known Egyptian history? Could they have recorded details about devices or practices that remain hidden even in the deepest sanctums of the Cairo Museum? Holding his torch aloft for a better look, he notes the deliberate placement of the motif. It sits at the heart of the wall, not marginal, but central, echoing the kinds of hieratic emphasis reserved for the highest mysteries. Around the central device, additional glyphs coil in looping, serpent-like lines. There is movement suggested here, and perhaps intent, but no translation rises easily from their forms. The device, it seems, was not merely decorative. It was functional or meaningful in ways now forgotten. His gloved thumb traces the shallow scratches beneath the carving, fingertips mapping out the rhythm of repeating shapes, interlocking triangles, circles, and crosshatches. They pulse gently under the brush of his light, echoing the same strange geometry he has glimpsed among banned scrolls, rumored to have been smuggled out of lost Alexandria libraries. Every detail points to a forgotten authority, hovering at the edges of pharaonic power, their secrets preserved with a paranoid precision. A dropped grain of sand skitters along the stone, and in that moment the atmosphere shifts. There is a sudden sense of being watched, as if spectral eyes are measuring the careful dance between curiosity and trespass. Was this motif a message, a warning, or a thread left purposefully subtle, awaiting patient discovery thousands of years hence? A sudden chill rises from the floor. Then, in a serendipitous glance, the archaeologist notices barely perceptible tool marks at the mural's edge. They run perpendicular to the known carving styles of the period. He slowly exhales, trying to steady his hand, and wonders what craftsman set these secrets into motion. The choice to engrave in defiance of the established order, or perhaps under its hidden patronage. What knowledge did they hope to shield from the march of empires, wars, and thieves? On the opposite side of the chamber, the sandstone wall seems to pulse in and out of focus, the effect of years of torch smoke and drifting particulate. As the night lengthens, the archaeologist sits cross-legged beneath the mural, jotting careful sketches and notes in the margin of his field journal. The echoing corridor amplifies every movement, a cough, a sigh, the soft thud of his satchel on stone, as if each sound belongs to some ancient inventory of secrets, drifting in through a fracture in the chamber ceiling. The moonlight adds its own spectral illumination, filling hollows in the carving with an ethereal glow. It sets the rods and spheres shimmering with a faint halo of dust. For a moment, the archaeologist loses himself in the motif, his thoughts spiraling. In ancient Egypt, knowledge was power, and the most lethal wisdom was always concealed in plain sight. At that precise moment, the calm is broken by a pattern interrupt, a sharp resonance. a hollow note as he accidentally taps the carved wall with the metal tip of his brush. The sound is wrong, deeper than expected, as if the stone conceals something hollow behind its face. The heart pulses a little faster. For all the emptiness of the ruined city and the miles of wind-buried avenues, it is this subtle, living detail that transforms the chamber from simple relic to gateway. Has he found not just evidence of a forgotten artifact, but the very passage by which its custodians vanished from history? He shifts, pressing his palm against the mural. The surface yields faintly, rangier than the rest. It is as if the very architecture thirsts to unburden its memory. Was this secret door always destined to be found? Or did its builders intend it as a final rebuke against imperial theft? In Egypt's most storied era, even the smallest anomaly can cast the longest shadow. Breath held, torch in hand, the archaeologist listens close. The silence behind the wall is complete, a kind of stillness that suggests emptiness, but also possibility. He sets down his torch, letting the orange halo pool across the mural. Wind through a distant crack stirs up sand, swirling it in miniature whirlwinds at his feet, as if the spirits themselves are offering a benediction or a warning. The rods and spheres, so carefully depicted, seem to shimmer in the torch's shifting light. The chamber waits, holding its breath as surely as its latest visitor. In the static awe of that moment, shafts of gold and blue moonlight collapse across the mural, painting the device anew. The archaeologist cannot help but feel that this is no ordinary motif, no mere embellishment. Something, or someone, with authority and intention, once set this in motion, a feature designed to outlast dynasties, plagues, and the vagaries of shifting sand. A detail so deliberate it seems woven to the very roots of civilization. The evidence here will not give up its meaning easily, but perhaps, with patience, the ancient city is at last ready to reveal what lies beneath the surface. His heart skipping, he resolves that the answer dwells not only in glyphs and carved stone, but within the hollow silence behind the wall. A silence thousands of years deep, waiting for its story to finally step forward with the coming dawn. In the gathering hush, the archaeologist's hand trembles just above the mural, torches flickering, sand whispering softly in the corners. He knows, with a certainty that tightens his breath, that within these ruins every mystery is merely another beginning. The story is not finished, and as the focus lingers on that haunting relief and the unyielding wall, the promise of an untouched chamber looms just beyond, biding its time in the depths of pharaonic night. A low, percussive thud echoes through the corridor each time the archaeologist's knuckles tap against unmoving limestone. The sound is familiar, almost comforting, a steady pulse in the otherwise uncanny silence. But here, at the far edge of a half-buried antechamber, the note shifts. It rings hollow, strange, as though the wall itself holds its breath. The archaeologist tilts her head, pausing to listen. Beyond the chilled air and dust motes trapped in the torch's glow, something waits. Minutes later, calloused hands have worked away at the mortar joints, revealing a seam, a fissure, expertly disguised for centuries. The stone yields with a muted groan, revealing a sliver of darkness. Cold air spills out, heavier than expected, its touch almost viscous. It coats exposed skin, prickling with the chill of a place untouched since its sealing in the age of pharaohs. The torchlight quivers through the new aperture, crawling across what at first appears to be just another chamber. Yet, as the archaeologist steps through, boots sinking into a century's worth of untouched sand, it becomes clear this is no ordinary storeroom. Inside, the silence presses in. It feels dampened, as though the walls themselves swallow every noise. The room curves in a way that defies the rigid geometry of familiar Egyptian construction. Its ceiling arches gracefully overhead, shaped like the vault of night, dotted here and there with chips of lapis, star-like in the firelight. Every breath amplifies the distant whisper of sand as it unsettles, stirred by intruding footsteps. The torch's flickering dance casts shadows in strange patterns along the far wall, illuminating a spiral of glyphs that draws the eye ever upward. Unlike the sun-baked bricks of the outer halls, the mortar binding these stones is cool to the touch and peculiar. It glimmers under torchlight, speckled with minerals unknown in the great quarries of Upper and Lower Egypt. Fingertips run along the seams and come away dusted with an unfamiliar residue, faintly metallic, slightly sweet on the air. This isn't from any recipe described in temple records or builders' archives. The archaeologist lets the silence stretch as she absorbs the implications. Had foreign hands worked here? Or was this the handiwork of a native, schooled in knowledge that history has failed to preserve? In a culture as meticulous as pharaonic Egypt's, the existence of such a chamber is a silent act of rebellion. A gaze settles on the spiral of glyphs, each painstakingly incised and then rubbed with pigment, long faded but not forgotten. There is something hypnotic in the way they wind toward the apex, where a cluster of stylized stars meets the darkened stone. No cartouche names the architect. There are no invocations to known gods, no spells for the afterlife. The glyphs tell their story in a language that reads more as feeling than word, a mystery layered over another. Every few feet, the patterns shift, introducing motifs not seen in other tombs or temples. Twisting lines that interlock like rivers on a map, punctuated by bizarre pictographs that evoke both insect and machine. With each step, the sound of boots against stone becomes more distant, more muffled, as though the chamber soaks up every sign of intrusion. Then, beneath the torch's warmth, the archaeologist discovers a shallow niche carved just at elbow height. Sand, still settled in place from the tomb's ceiling, hides its contents. Careful, slow, she brushes it away. A fragment of worked metal emerges, not gold or copper, but an alloy unknown to their time. Cool, heavy, it fits in the palm like a talisman. Running a thumb along its edge, the surface vibrates with faint lines, a cross-hatched grid, so finely wrought it almost seems etched by delicate machinery rather than hand. A left turn emerges, the impossible perfection of the join between metal and stone. The artifact, cradled in the niche, sits as if it was grown in situ. No visible gap, not even a hint of chisel mark. Spots of silvery oxidation fleck its surface, but the underlying metal remains remarkably intact. The vibration in fingertips is no illusion. This fragment hums softly, a resonance too subtle to be mechanical. The chamber, it seems, has its own heartbeat. Every few moments, the glyphs on the wall catch the light, glinting in perfect counterpoint to the artifact's dull glow, as if echoing a pattern no longer decipherable. Outside, the desert tips toward dusk. The world grows quieter, the breeze just a whisper threading past ancient doors. Inside, the air thickens, growing even more still. The archaeologist notices condensation on the inner walls, a rarity in these arid ruins, tracing slow paths downward, suggesting some technology at work, controlling the microclimate of this forgotten place. The spiral of glyphs continues ever upward, culminating at the ceiling's center in a depiction of a winged disk, surrounded by geometric diagrams, unlike anything seen in the tombs of the valley. One symbol, strange and unsettling, appears to be a stylized eye, but distorted, its pupil replaced by an arrangement of concentric circles, each intricately inscribed. With a shock, the archaeologist realizes the circles mirror the metal fragment's own patterns, an unexpected connection that raises the stakes again. To document the mysterious find, she sketches the glyphs with a trembling hand, transferring the patterns into her book with urgent precision. The chalk snaps beneath her grip as she attempts to capture the intricate detail of the ceiling's central disc, the soft echo bouncing through the ruins. Each line she draws seems less an act of recording and more of invocation, as though the room's story is awakening by degrees. A subtle, almost imperceptible draft moves through the chamber. The torch flickers, casting shifting clouds of light over a newly discerned seam in the floor. Again, her hands work methodically, patience sharpened by the knowledge that every grain of sand, every brick in these eternal structures guards secrets. Lifting away a palm-sized panel, she uncovers another clue, a cache of ancient beads, their glass unlike any produced in the workshops of Memphis or Thebes. Each bead, when held against the flickering light, refracts it into spectral colors, bathing the chamber in a shifting aurora. The beads, along with the metal fragment and glyphs, form a triad of puzzles, each pointing away from familiar explanations. Are they evidence of lost knowledge, or do they hint at hands, minds, or tools unrecorded by official chroniclers? Only deep analysis and time will tell. But as dust settles in the beam of her torch and the spiral glyphs continue their endless climb, the archaeologist steps back, perspective shifting. The room itself feels alive now, as if its story had only been lying dormant, waiting for an audience. At this twist, the sensory motif sharpens. Each footstep seems to ring out twice, once against stone, and again in the memory of the chamber. The air, long confined to this secret space, moves as though it is waking up too. The sense of being watched is palpable, not by eyes, but by the sum of history itself. An ancient riddle, suspended in this fortified cocoon beneath Egyptian sands, dares anyone to attempt its unraveling. As she departs, a quiet detail lingers, a fragment of pigment, crimson and unlike the stabilized ochres beloved by Egyptian artisans, flakes from the ceiling's edge. It lands soundlessly, dissolving in her hand as though it had never existed, leaving behind only memory and the faintest taste of salt in the dry air. What will the scholars make of a pigment, a metal alloy, a glass bead, and inscrutable glyphs that spiral out from the heart of an apparently ordinary ruin? The chamber has yielded more questions than answers. In the torchlit darkness, the archaeologist casts a final look upward. The vault reflects back, an unbroken constellation, and for a moment, the line between known and unknown blurs. The sand outside, restless, seems to carry the unanswered mystery into the night, the promise of histories waiting to be rewritten. Beyond the entry, the world is waiting. Above, the desert's twilight slips in, bringing with it the certainty that discovery here is only beginning. The findings, hastily shared with trusted colleagues, ignite debate as heated as the midday sun over the desert. The midday sky burned white across the scattered ruins, heat curling off ancient flagstones, casting restless shadows where old walls once soared. From the shelter of a low overhang, Dr. Raphael steadied her breathing, sand caught in the creases of her trousers and under her fingernails. The whisper of sand scuttling along stone was the only thing that interrupted the humming silence as she pored over the newly unearthed tablet, still dusted with desert grit, and waited for her colleagues to arrive. Soon, the air filled with the hurried footfalls of Dr. Abbas, his sandals stirring Pharaoh's dust, eyes wide in anticipation. He had barely glanced at the artifact before launching into his argument. "It's a late-period forgery," he declared, gesturing emphatically at the form of the glyphs. "Look at the hand. Too stiff, too shallow. Someone copied greatness and missed the heart." But Miriam, the linguist, lingered at the tablet's edge, letting her torch beam linger on a peculiar cartouche. She shook her head. "Compare the spacing on these characters to 5th Dynasty reliefs, or better, the lost ivory scribe's palette found at Elephantine. Something's not right. These aren't forgeries. They're old. Very old. Maybe even pre-dynastic." The debate crackled through the camp as sharp as the sun's glare. Even in the relative cool of the shade, tempers flared. As Dr. Raphael listened, she could almost feel the ruins themselves shifting, stones whispering layered truths beneath the relentless winds. The tablet, a palm-sized slice of smooth limestone, bore an inscription that confounded definition. Half the glyphs matched nothing in any deciphered lexicon. The rest danced between recognizable and alien, as though the scribe had straddled two worlds, a known script and a forgotten tongue. When the experts back in Cairo examined the sample, certainty splintered further. Radiocarbon dating from 3 labs returned a spread wider than a millennium. The limestone itself, local to this stretch of the western desert, contained resin traces not native to Egypt, as if it had traveled great distances before someone carved it here. There was even a hint of foreign metal in the pigment. Coaxing more answers from the evidence only deepened the enigma, each scientist arguing for a truth that slipped further from their grasp with every test result returned. As twilight approached, Raphael sat on the cool sand, tracing the unfinished wall mural recently laid bare by the day's work. Half glimpsed in the flickering torchlight, the mural revealed a scene of men and women not adorned with pharaonic crowns or usual regalia. These figures hunched over scrolls and reed pens, surrounded not by gold, but by strange mechanical forms, simple gears, odd vases, and one peculiar device that resembled the star chart discovered in the fabled tomb of Senenmut. Alexis, a younger field researcher, ventured, "What if this is a record of a dynasty erased from the royal lists, a reign devoted not to conquest or building tombs, but to knowledge and invention?" Everyone fell silent for a moment, listening to the sigh of wind in the dark corridor. Then the team's historian murmured, "It would explain the absence of royal markers, the lack of cartouches bearing familiar lineages. Scholars, not pharaohs, at the dawn of the Middle Kingdom, wiped from memory by a jealous successor, perhaps. But some suspected something stranger. Under the wavering lamp, micro-abrasion patterns on the limestone seemed inconsistent with both late and early Egyptian chisels. Neither flint nor copper left quite those telltale marks. Omar, the conservator, noted, "I've seen something like this on imported Levantine statuary, maybe Mycenaean import, trade contact from far off. Or maybe," he paused, lowering his voice, "they traveled further than we believed, into lands still unknown to us. Could this tablet be the trace of some great exchange, a blending of civilizations lost to sand?" The theory set off another wave of hushed debate. In this space, echoing with the sound of their own voices and the muted shuffle of ancient dust, nothing seemed impossible. The hallmark of Egypt's mysteries was always their ability to multiply, not resolve. Every explanation engendered more paradox beneath the painted ceilings and crumbled beams. In the golden half-light, the old stones seemed to guard their secrets jealously, promising revelation only to those willing to abandon certainty for the chase. Then came the lab report, transmitted in the pre-dawn hours. The pigment traced on the tablet's glyphs contained elements more consistent with Central Asian mineral sources than North African. An unsettling chill crept into the chamber as the implications dawned on the team. Intercontinental contact so many millennia ago would force a rewriting of everything they thought they knew about Egypt's place in the ancient world. Alexis broke the uneasy silence, voice trembling as torchlight danced along the glyphs. If these connections are true, what else was exchanged? Religion, science, myth? Before anyone could answer, a subtle detail interrupted their ruminations. The exposed corner of a wall, overlooked until now in the focus on the tablet, bore a paint smear in deep green, a color notoriously rare and difficult to preserve in antiquity here. The patch, when exposed, revealed a spiral motif echoing patterns more common to the mysterious sea peoples. It was a twist that split the group into opposing camps again, some arguing for lost traders, others for homegrown innovators reaching out to other coasts before recorded seafaring times. The desert night pressed in, filled with the whisper of sand against ancient stones, as the team lingered in torchlit awe. Occasionally, their footsteps would echo off into unseen hollows, as if other corridors waited patiently, hidden beneath centuries of drifted dunes. The air, warm by day, now cooled enough to make the glyphs shimmer in the light, lines blurring into one another, the meaning just out of reach as always. What if the mosaic of Egypt's past has always been missing these pieces, erased by rivals or claimed by the wind and the desert's shifting memory? Even now, as the debate raged on beneath the stars, every member of the team was acutely aware that the next answer might be hidden in the stone beneath their fingertips, or in a layer of paint yet to be carefully exposed. A gust of wind coiled through the broken chamber, stirring the loose sand until it coated fresh footprints and buried each heated argument with the indifference of the ages. Somewhere further inside the maze of passageways, an untouched cache of wooden construction tools, still stacked as if their owners had stepped away only hours before, waited for discovery, offering yet another riddle to a team already lost within Egypt's ever-deepening archive. An unnatural hush lingers in the unfinished chamber, where fine particles of sand drift endlessly across cold limestone. The seasoned archaeologist pauses just beyond the threshold, a place littered with tools, chisels, hammers, wooden mallets resting as if time itself forgot to reclaim them. Each artifact lies meticulously aligned along the ledges, dusted with the faintest trace of ash from ancient torches. The air bears the sharp tang of old stone, mingled with the sweet metallic scent of iron left to sleep in centuries-old silence. Shadows deepen in recesses where stonemasons once carved with practiced rhythm. Beyond the immediate, a half-hewn stairway curves downward. The steps, interrupted mid-chisel, cascade into a pool of utter dark. Everything here hints at sharp, sudden desertion. Plates with scraps of dried barley bread and charred fish. A clay pitcher tipped sideways, its caught residue long since turned to powder. Footprints, faint but discernible, press into the chamber's swept sand. They lead nowhere, merely doubling back as if searching for lost purpose, then vanishing against a wall where a shallow ledger juts half-finished from the limestone. The torch the archaeologist holds flickers, revealing faded glyphs dancing along the carved base, their meaning lost in an era before even the Nile ruled this kingdom's cycles. The silence is almost alive, disturbed only by the archaeologist's breathing, slow and measured, echoing with every tentative step. Here, in the chill heart of the ruins, there are no scrawls to speak of warning or invader, no scuffs in the stone, no bloodied tools, nothing but abandonment crystallized in an unfinished act. Each surface whispers a question, a riddle posed not in words, but in the riddle of labor left incomplete. Why would workers, bound for generations by pharaonic will, abandon this tomb so close to completion? As torchlight brushes a row of jars stacked along the rear wall, their contents cascade back in time. Pigment crumbles, careful bundles of flax, lengths of unfinished rope. Each item is poised on the edge of purpose, abandoned as if the artisans meant to return within the hour. The historian's heart stutters. A sense of trespass intensifies. The past here is not dead, but paused. The distinct sensation arises that a bustling crew paused for a meal just beyond the corner. Perhaps even now, the dry air retains the warmth of their hurried departure. A delicate crunch underfoot announces a new discovery. Scattered on the ground, half hidden by the powder of the ages, lies a pallet splotched with black paint, its stone worn deeply by use. Close by, the imprint of a slender hand can be traced in the dust. A meal, bread torn, olives left uneaten, a cup containing the last dregs of beer remains undisturbed. The silence grows heavier, the chamber's unfinished narrative deepening. A story is carved here, but whose hand wrote its final line? The arching entry behind reveals further clues. A section of wall, marked by a sharp and unintended fracture, suggests the beginnings of a tunnel never finished. Rough blocks lean at improbable angles, ready for transport yet never claimed by muscle or lever. Time buckles. The imagination fills with the clang of chisel against stone, the calloused laughter of workers, the gruff command of overseers. Yet here, that noise turns fragile and stilled. There are tools, chisels, stone saws, lying as if just set down. Not a single artifact is shattered, no valuables abducted, no hurried footprints tearing toward escape. It is as if the entire enterprise evaporated through mere will. A closer look at the chamber's edge reveals a collapsed meal. 3 bowls positioned for sharing, their contents spoiled to dust. One is overturned, scattered grains gleaming in the torchlight. Plates arranged for a communal rest are now relics of an eternal pause. The evidence is unmistakable. This was no exodus of violence or threat. No raiders, no warning cries echoing down the corridor. Instead, purposeful hands stilled in mid-task, thoughts left half-spoken, and plans forever curtailed. The archaeologist turns their focus to an unfinished stele tucked in a side alcove. The carving, delicate yet jagged at the upper edge, depicts a figure with arms outstretched before a rising sun. The lower inscription, however, stops abruptly. The final symbols hang suspended, half-formed, as though the carver stepped away, blinked, and never returned. The torch picks up labyrinthine cracks running through the panel, each fissure a quiet record of lost intent. Emerald motes of sunlight, refracted through a narrow vent above, paint a shifting lattice along the uneven floor. They illuminate a toppled stone block, wedged between what would have been an ascending step and a half-carved wall frieze. It seems the block fell not from collapse, but a slip in the middle of lifting, a mistake caught and never corrected. Scarred finger marks in the grit suggest a hand's desperate attempt to right it, the effort abandoned in an instant. This tableau is as haunting as it is beautiful. The dream of an eternal resting place, left suspended in a space untouched by finality. Across the wall at shoulder height, the ineffable faintness of an earlier glyph glimmers. It is not written in the language of the well-known hieroglyphs, but something older, a looping, enigmatic script that defies clear translation. The faint torchlight dances along the glyphs, rendering them almost spectral, as if a whisper from the depths of Egypt's unknowable past. The archaeologist's breath catches. Each step between the artifacts, a bowl of dates petrified to leather, a copper ore tinged with verdigris, deepens the sense of trespass. Whose last act was it to abandon this script so close to the tomb's edge? Another chamber lies beyond, a corridor leading nowhere, unfinished walls trembling with the echo of what almost was. Here, among the dust, even the most skeptical observer cannot silence the pulse of a latent mystery. It is not just the tomb or its abandoned tools. It is the eerie precision with which the work halted, not chaos, but a deliberate vanishing. No evidence of struggle. No half-shouted warning preserved in the stone. Just the absence, all the more chilling because it is so ordinary. The whisper of sand over carved rock fills the void, every footstep magnifying the impossibility of the story's abrupt end. For an instant, silence turns tangible, the weight of unspoken fealty, of craftsman's oaths suspended mid-sentence. What drove the final hammer blow to stillness, here, in the heart of the pharaonic desert, where time itself seems reticent to offer closure. The clues beckon, but every answer slips away, echoing back through the millennia. Just as certainty teeters on the edge of frustration, the atmosphere shifts. A sharp glint beneath the torch reveals something out of place. Near the spiraling staircase, a slate plaque rests in the shallow niche, marked with symbols seen nowhere else in all of Egypt. Its edges are smoothed by touch, its image depicting two hands cupped around a single oval, obscured by deliberate smudging. The artifact's exact origin and purpose are a mystery, but its design echoes motifs later found in the Valley of the Kings, an anachronism that upends the timeline of artistic influence. The moment crackles with revelation, and the darkened corridor takes on new dimensions. As the torch's flame gutters in a chill gust, itself inexplicable in a sealed chamber, the distant chords of some ancient undertaking seem to resolve and then scatter. This place, stubbornly unfinished, may yet possess a purpose bound in secrecy deeper than stone. The air returns to stillness. The only answer, a further journey, deeper along the riddle-laden path. At the far edge of the tomb, where the ledge meets a slab of loose stone, barely visible in dust-tinged sunlight, a promise of the next enigma stirs. Hidden beneath a false floor, near the tomb's edge, a cache of personal tokens lingers, casting new doubts on what happened here, and drawing the archaeologist, along with us, closer to the heart of history's silence. Crouched beneath the low lintel, the archaeologist drew a slow breath and allowed her eyes to adjust to the shifting light. Fine dust floated in gold ribbons, disturbed only by the faintest tremor of anticipation. Here, nestled at the ragged edge of a pharaoh's burial chamber, she pressed her fingers against a cool, uneven slab, stone-worn faint by centuries, yet concealing something untouched by human hands for millennia. From between cracks, a thin moan of wind trickled in from above the desert, carrying the subtle salt of distance and ancient time. The chamber smelled of baked earth and the lingering tang of oils, still trapped in shadow after all these centuries. Something about the geometric precision of the cut floor whispered of purpose, a meticulous intention, neither wholly Egyptian nor belonging to any tradition she had lain eyes on before. A practiced touch found a hollow, a part of the floor that, when pressed, yielded with the sigh of dislodged sand. The stone swung open in a slow arc, revealing a dark cavity beneath. Torchlight quivered, sending jittering glyphs along the chiseled walls. At her feet, a collection of objects sprawled across a bed of time, blackened sand. Obsidian beads, each smooth and impossibly dark, gleamed against a scatter of dusty linen. Even in the still gloom, these artifacts gave off an unsettling energy, as if the weight of secrets lingered in their presence. She knelt closer. The beads were nothing like the carnelian or faience, so prized by ancient craftsmen. These stones drank the light, mirroring none of the gold or turquoise hues that filled the tomb's upper reaches. Instead, each bead seemed to draw her inward, reflecting not so much her face as the shadowed suggestion of another world, now almost forgotten. Near them, a palm-sized fragment of tablet lay half-buried. The markings on its pitted surface, scored with what looked like the careful touch of a reed stylus, puzzled even her practiced eye. The script curled and forked into shapes that predated the familiar precision of hieroglyphs, symbols belonging to no catalogue in her years of scholarship. They looked older, stranger, and somehow more urgent than the frozen stories of Egypt's dynastic age. Beyond language, textiles told their own story. One swatch, battered but preserved by the dry kiss of the tomb, revealed a weave unseen in the annals of Egyptology. Its threads looped and twisted in patterns foreign to every fabric fragment yet uncovered. She traced a fingertip over the pattern, half expecting the linen to dissolve beneath her touch. But it held, stubborn, defiant, whispering of artisans whose names were lost before Egypt had a name for itself. Catching the flicker of her torch on the wall, she paused, listening to the hush. Footsteps, her own, echoed in rhythm with her heartbeat, slow and cautious. If these items belonged to a forgotten civilization, one that slipped silently into the roots of Egyptian myth, how many other truths might still be hiding in the darkness, sewn between the stones? Outside the chamber, the desert's breath pressed in, grains of sand sifting against the ruined pylons, slipping over the sharp, sun-bleached bones of columns jutting from the sands. Each relic here weighed heavily in her mind, casting the known history of pharaonic Egypt in a new and uncanny light. The edges of certainty began to blur. A sudden glimmer in the sand caught her attention. A crescent-shaped bead, joined with a delicate gold wire. She picked it up, feeling the odd chill it held, as if the object retained a memory of a time far colder than this burning desert. The style of the goldwork didn't match any known Egyptian era. Instead, it hinted at techniques whispered about in untidy field notes of desert wanderers, whispers of coastal peoples, lost to shifting dunes and the age's slow devouring. She pictured the hands that strung these beads, weaving them with a language without words. Did their creators ever imagine that someday, sealed beneath the hush of collapse, their art would surface again, read not by their kin, but by strangers wrapped in the trappings of a future world? With each discovery, the tomb, the whole notion of Egypt as a self-contained civilization, grew blurrier. The historians' neat labels and dynastic charts faltered at the seams. An obsidian bead, a half-scripted tablet, and a bolt of woven linen, each a thread in a tapestry stretching past the farthest memory. What unknown people brushed up against the rising Nile, leaving only resonances in forgotten crypts? Near the back of the chamber, her torch picked out a thumbnail groove in the limestone. She brushed away dust, feeling the faint ridges of still another set of symbols, swirls and lines that overlapped the arcane script on the tablet below. Two scripts, entwined yet distinct, both predating every written record available to modern scholars. A moment later, something less tangible than discovery, but even more disquieting. The whisper of sand, low and ceaseless, seemed to shift. It was as though, for a heartbeat, the boundaries of the tomb and the greater desert around it melted into one. Out there in the blinding sunlight, these relics' story grew larger than Egypt, greater than any one kingdom. These were echoes from the bones of a vanished world, trickling forward through time, a ripple now widening into a surge. She realized, suddenly, that the configuration of the beads matched a pattern seen only once before, carved on a stray block pulled from the foundations of a ruined city far to the east, an altogether different civilization, supposedly unconnected to Egypt in any documented exchange. That small familiarity cracked the case wide open, casting the role of Egypt not as the originator, but as a link in a much older chain. The true puzzle was not only what these artifacts were, but how they had arrived here, centuries out of place, resting in a tomb, sealed long before their story ought to have ended. That was the twist that split the silence. Evidence, clear and irrefutable, that the boundaries drawn by history were porous and misleading. She felt a shiver, despite the tomb's stifling warmth. What other artifacts remained secret, stitched deep beneath this land's skin? How many civilizations had shaped the riverbed's memory, each one leaving behind silent tokens and broken words? Above, sunlight changed hue, seeping through cracks in the ceiling, gilding the dust in a new radiance. The archaeologist stood at the threshold, caught between wonder and a creeping sense of doubt. In the hush, the flutter of torchlight on the unknown symbols seemed almost to breathe. Just beyond the chamber, the desert lay in wait, a tapestry of shadows, secrets, and the quiet promise of more discoveries. Each footstep would write the next line of this unfolding mystery, threading ancient Egypt ever more tightly into the fabric of a world lost before history began. As dawn stains the desert horizon gold, the archaeologist stands amid broken columns and secret shadows, the silent recorders of lost time. As dawn stains the ragged fringe of the western desert gold, the seasoned archaeologist pauses between two toppled columns that jut from the ancient sand like the ribs of some vanished colossus. The sky overhead glows with the promise of another relentless day. Yet, in the shadowed embrace of these ruined walls, the air feels cool and expectant. Each broken stone is heavy with the hush of centuries, carrying the weight of lives lived, secrets kept, and mysteries still slumbering just beneath the surface. His footsteps resound against the flagstones in the antechamber of a forgotten tomb, swirling a low whisper of sand that slips sinuously into every unseen crack and glyph. The torchlight he carries flickers across faded murals, casting elongated shadows that dart and vanish, making the cryptic images shimmer as if the gods themselves are shifting within the stone. Today, the atmosphere is thick with that singular tension that comes only when a boundary is about to be crossed, when the static hush of history is about to break and let in a sudden rush of new knowing. For weeks, the team has traced a faint seam running across the north wall, stubbornly resisting their tools and questions. Each morning, workers dust away drifts of sand that have crept overnight, only to reveal the same impassive carved faces staring out from the limestone. But now the stones yield, one after another, and a secret portal swings inward. Beyond it yawns a darkness deeper and truer than the shimmer of dusk overhead. Here, in this untouched corridor, echoes amplify every tremor of footfall, blending with the faint whistling of wind migrating through slits in the stone. Overhead, trailing black resin has caught in the grooves of the ceiling hieroglyphs. Each step forward stirs centuries-old dust motes, sending them dancing lazily in the torchlight, while the shapes of falcons and humans ride the currents. Inside, the chamber is a world unto itself, a capsule sealed tight while dynasties rose and fell. The air holds a peculiar tang, calcite, char, a faint memory of myrrh. The archaeologist and his team remain silent, the hush broken only by the brittle crunch of sand under their boots. Along the base of one wall, a line of objects awaits in dignified procession. Statues, anthropomorphic and animal-headed. A delicate cosmetic vessel, still flecked with deep blue pigment. A lapis lazuli scarab, caught between the forefeet of a golden lion. Each artifact, meticulously positioned, hints at a ritual purpose lost to any straightforward reading. But it is the far wall, the blankest, least adorned, that draws the team's eyes. Here, scribed faintly into a slab, almost obliterated by time and the work of grave robbers, is a matrix of glyphs that do not match any catalogued system. Shapes twist and invert onto themselves, combining familiar symbols with elements neither pharaonic nor Greco-Roman. The pulse of anticipation intensifies. Across generations of study, no record has described such a script, not in surviving papyri or on the stelae lining museum halls. As the team begins to photograph and record every inch, a chill seems to settle under the collar, despite the heat outside. The sand at their feet grinds softly as they shift, hushed voices echoing against the unyielding walls. The seasoned archaeologist recalls the strange patterns left behind in other Egyptian sites, occasional glimpses of motifs out of place, like astronomical symbols centuries ahead of known knowledge, or hints of foreign objects worked seamlessly into otherwise familiar grave goods. The room holds its breath. If this script remains untranslatable, it threatens the very thread of the historical narrative. Could it be some funerary code? A lost language, or a message meant not for mortals at all? As the observers move closer with careful curiosity, a subtle pattern emerges. The positions of these objects seem to map constellations, each artifact occupying a place corresponding to a bright, familiar star. The lapis lion crouches where Sirius would rise. The scarab stands in for Orion's belt. No previous Egyptian site has offered so direct, so deliberate, an astronomical alignment within a burial chamber. The coincidence stirs a collective nervousness. The desert wind, funneled through a hairline fracture in the stone, moans softly, an unintended harmony with the echo of sandal against rock. For centuries, scholars have read Egyptian religion as rooted in the cycle of the Nile and the promise of the afterlife. But this constellation chamber gestures towards an understanding still veiled, as if the ancients mapped not just the heavens, but some unknown physics of the soul. Then, a disruptive detail, a twist in the chamber's calm, patient logic. Wedged between a base and the wall, a fragment of carved dark stone protrudes at an impossible angle. The archaeologist kneels, brushing aside the powdery sand, and reveals a chunk of granite flecked with meteoritic iron, unmistakably extraterrestrial. Its edges have been worked smooth with geometric precision, leaving it cold and weighty in the hand. Dozens of anomalous Egyptian blades and ornaments have been traced to meteorite iron, but never in this quantity, nor serving this central, a ritual purpose. The fragment fits perfectly when pressed against an indentation at the wall, directly under the unreadable glyphs, as if it acts as a key, or perhaps an anchor, linking the fate of the occupant to the wider universe. The implication lingers. Had the ancients marked the fall of a star, memorialized it, woven it into their practices of death and rebirth. Conflicting theories surge to the surface. Some whisper of ancient contact, a time when visitors or lost cultures arrived with knowledge from the skies, embedding it in the sacred spaces of the Nile Valley. Others look for a simpler, terrestrial explanation. Yet the tension between these interpretations is palpable. The team's historian mutters about a forgotten pharaoh whose reign was cut short by a celestial event recorded in a single, ambiguous relief miles away. The architects debate whether the oculus in the chamber ceiling was intentionally positioned to capture the light of a rare stellar conjunction, or if it is, after all, nothing more than a tragic flaw in construction. The answers tremble, just beyond reach. The torchlight guttering in the stale air throws the unreadable script into strange relief. The characters seem to move, to slide from meaning like water across glass. The only certainty is uncertainty itself. Here, with each breath and pulse, the archaeologist senses the vastness of what lies outside understanding. The sand, ever restless, creeps silently back into corners just swept clean. Soon it will swallow the chamber again, hiding its riddles for another age to find. Yet, in this final, fleeting moment before they leave, the team lingers, each haunted by separate questions. To stand in such a place where cosmic iron meets coded language and ritual geometry challenges all certainty, all easy answers. The faint scent of resin and the cool hush of stone offer no resolution, only the assurance that each step into this chamber binds them not just to the story of ancient Egypt, but to the grand mystery of civilization itself. As they retreat from the shadows and the sand reclaims their footprints, one thing is clear. Some secrets are meant less for solving than for reverence. The ancient walls echo with mysteries undiminished by time, inviting those who enter not to command answers, but to stand in awe of history's fathomless silence. This is how the journey ends, not with triumphant certainty, but with a lingering reverence, the sense of having touched, just briefly, the unknowable heart of the past.